I am out here on a beautiful spring day in Minnesota, about as beautiful as it can get in the spring of Minnesota. And I have a lake behind me, and it's just a great reminder of the greatness of our God. You know, I look out into nature and I see His hand everywhere. You know, when we look at all of creation, we look at the trees, and we look at the fields, we even look at farms, and we look at plants, and we can plainly see that God exists. Genesis 1 really shows us that in His creation. You know, it talks about God creating the heavens and the earth, and then it also talks about Him creating the waters and separating the land from the waters. And also then it talks about Him creating the beasts of the field. And then chiefly it talks about Him creating humans as the pinnacle of His creation. And so when we look out at creation, it's like God's fingerprint is everywhere. David says it well when he says that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims His handiwork. And that's such an awesome way to describe it, because when he talks about the heavens, he's talking about the sky, and he's talking about the stars, and you know, the atmosphere, even up to outer space. That when we look at a night sky, we can see that it is pointing towards God. It is pointing towards His glory. It's pointing towards His goodness. You know, growing up in the city, I never really got a chance to see the night sky in the open air, and how beautiful and how amazing the stars can be at night. And now that I've lived in a small town now for the better part of probably 10 years or so, I've really fallen in love with being able to see the goodness and the character of God as He has created everything. And so it talks about the heavens declare, and that word declare is sort of like a letter of introduction. It's sort of like God saying, hey, you know, this is me, this is what I'm like, this is my creativity, this is who I am, this is what I do. And so the heavens declare His glory. And when we talk about the glory, the word in Hebrew is very closely related to the word weight. And so when we think about God's glory, you know, obviously we talk about His goodness and His holiness and His might and His eternality and all those good things, all those good attributes that make God who He is. But and when we put them all into a bucket and think about who He is, there's a weightiness to that. It's not something that we should take lightly. God's glory is something that is heavy. It's sort of like what Marty McFly would say quite a bit in Back to the Future. I'd always say,
"This is heavy duty, Doc. This sounds pretty heavy. Whoa, this is heavy.
Oh, this is heavy. This is heavy. Oh, this is heavy, Doc. Pretty heavy, huh? Great Scott.
I know, this is heavy."
The sky above proclaims His handiwork, and it proclaims this idea of Him preaching, of Him being like a pastor on a Sunday morning talking about the goodness of God. And so he says, the sky above, everything that we see here, man, it's calling out to God's handiwork, the work of His hand, all the things that He has created. So when we look out here, we see plainly the goodness and the character of God. You know, when you look at a painting, how do you know that a painter exists? Well, you know that a painter exists because the painting is there, right? And the same thing with a building. If you were to look at a building, there's no way that any rational person could say that building just sort of popped out of nowhere, because nobody believes that. We know that a painting points proof positive that there was a painter, and a building shows that there was indeed a builder. And the same way is with God, that when we look at all of this creation and we see everything that is out here, how do we know that there's a creator? Well, creation points to it. So someone made all of this. There's no way that any of this could have ever come just by some random chance. And since God is so much greater than any painter or any builder, you know, we can look out here at his creation and we can say, oh man, God, you're awesome. You're good, you're glorious, you're mighty, you're great. We're going to look at that here in Romans chapter 1 in our next session. But for now, we just join what David had said even in Psalm chapter 8 when he says, when I look at the stars of the sky, when I look up at the heavens, you know, what is man that you're mindful of him? And that's how we should feel. We should be in so much of awe of who God is that we wonder, man, why would God even think of me? Now, as we get a little bit further into this idea of revelation and who God is and how he has revealed himself, we're going to find out that what we see out here, what we see in this creation, like, it points to who God is, and it helps us to see that indeed God does exist, but it's not sufficient for us to know him fully. I mean, we can never know enough about him simply by looking out at creation. It tells us something about him, and again, we'll talk about that in Romans chapter 1 in the next session. But it doesn't tell us enough about how to be right with him and how to be saved. So stay tuned, and we're going to learn more about this great God.
Maybe there's a happy tree, evergreen tree. He lives right there, starting with just touching the canvas, and just the corner of the brush, just the corner, and begin pushing, making the bristles bend slightly downward. See there? Look at that. Isn't that a nice little tree?